Welcome to the Father Focus podcast.
Father Focus.
Check.
Why are we talking about this? Why does it matter?
So shaping your kids into powerful people.
Bro, let that brother fly.
Check.
All right, let's
You
go.
ready?
All right, let's go. I was messing. Welcome to the Father Focus podcast. We are your host, my man Nathan, Jermaine.
Hello.
What up?
Why do you always sound like
Awkward.
that when you say hello? Can you try a different
it's all
one?
right.
Well, I had a boss who, if you guys ever seen the movie Office Space,
Oh,
which
no.
no one of you guys
I
probably
have seen that
Okay.
crazy movie.
You know, Lumber, whatever
Yes.
his name is. Literally, I had a boss just like that. He would come to my desk. Yeah, Nathan. And then he'd just say something random. And every time he left, I'm not exaggerating, every single time, he'd be like, okay. I mean, I was
All
like,
right.
is this real life? Like, legit. He did it every time.
So now you do it.
I
And
carry that
then
voice with me.
Jermaine and I and the rest of our guests are like, hey, why
Well,
is he
now you know the
doing that?
context.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's leave
Still
that
weird.
fast. Anyway, want to thank you all for listening to the Father Focus podcast. Want to thank you for allowing us to get into your cars, kitchen, garages, wherever you're at while you're listening to this podcast. We just want to say thank you for inviting us into your life, speak into your life, and we think that it's going to be an interesting episode, especially for men and especially for those of you who have sons today. We're going to get off into some discussion about sons and manhood and the goal, targets, and our visions in the future for man. And I'm looking forward to it. Guys, how y'all doing today?
No.
Jermaine. I
We're
love
doing
it. Jermaine.
great.
Jermaine,
This
how are
guy's
you?
Fired.
Don't speak for me.
He's fired.
Don't
He's
speak
fired.
for me.
Fired guy.
Yeah, we're doing great, man. Glad to be in the studio again with you guys.
I had a delicious pour over.
Yeah, he did.
It was a
coffee.
natural Colombian for all you coffee nerds out
Mm.
there. It was, am I right? Our producer Carlos is in here. He also had one.
Get
it was
Get it
definitely
right,
a
bro.
Colombian
Nicaragua.
coffee. Yeah.
No,
Don't correct me. I
Get
know
it
my
right,
coffee
bro.
stuff. It was
He
delicious.
does actually know his coffee
I
stuff.
know. He a little
It was
bougie,
delicious.
Little coffee snob.
V60 pour over, in case anyone was wondering. It was really good.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
I was about to say.
Coffee has a
what
PSI.
the
What
heck?
is
All
that?
right. You guys are
V60.
uncultured. Let's move on.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here today. Going to be talking about boys, sons, and our future, and how we are going to raise them up with a particular kind of ideology, and to teach them what it is to be a man. So, if I could ask the two of you a quick question.
Ooh, I can't wait.
If there was one particular thing that you would like to teach your sons about being a man, what would that be? Jermaine, if I can get you to launch us off into
Yeah,
this
for sure.
topic, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think.
And for new listeners,
Yeah.
just tell us about your son. And,
Yeah. So
maybe
my
a little
son
bit.
is named Asher. He's 11 years old. He's all boy, everything boy, engineering mind, like building
Awesome.
things, likes working with his hands. He loves to work. He loves it. I have to make him stop. Like
Yeah.
he just works all the time.
Do you like sports?
He does like sports.
I'm hoping he's not slow like his dad.
No, he's not slow. He's playing.
I'm
He's
just
playing
kidding.
flag football right now.
Jermaine was incredibly fast when we were in college.
Flag football. I'm trying to get him into getting him into basketball
Okay.
a little bit, maybe baseball.
Oh, you
So
should
we'll
definitely
see.
not teach him how to play basketball.
So I'll cross you over. Anyway, so getting him into baseball. So he's enjoying that. So
Nice.
yeah, all things boy.
That's great.
But if I had one thing, well, several things I would teach him, but the one thing in particular I
You
would
can only
say
pick one.
is that the stages of manhood are a gift, I think. And what I mean by that,
that's
it's
good.
oftentimes seen as like these stages are like inconvenient. You know, it's almost like we're in a rush to get to the next stage, or
Yeah.
you know, we're not enjoying the stages. So I would tell him the stages of manhood are a gift. And as a boyhood, for example, I would say embrace failure and take risk. And our culture penalizes. We like risk takers on one end, but we penalize risk takers
Only
on
if
the
they
other end.
succeed.
Right. Only if they succeed. So we don't hear about the failures. I mean, we're sitting in a studio that took risk. You know, they launched a business. They're in an industry, and I'm sure they have their own story about risk taking and failure. And I would encourage my son, hey, failure is a part of life. Failure isn't final. right? Failure does not define you. You're okay to take risk. Hey, get yourself up, brush yourself off, and let's keep moving forward. I think that's something that's not being said enough. Affirming risk takers, affirming those who make mistakes. It's like don't count the many times you fail, but how many times you got back up and kept going forward.
Dude, tell me a little bit about like practically, like what that looks like for you and Asher, and you to kind of push him off into taking risks and actually failure. Have you experienced any of that? Coached him through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our kids want to please us. If our relationship's healthy, they want to do well.
Right.
Our kids want to do well. For the most part, they want to please. They want approval. And I think I've watched him. Asher's he's very detailed, like A, B, C, D. He's very organized. I remember when he was younger, his sister would go in his room and mess with stuff just to make him upset. Like he'd have things organized in a place, and she'd go in there and Elisa, she'd mess it up, and he'd freak out. He'd go in there, and my car was moving, this was turned. He knew exactly what she did.
That's awesome.
Just to bug with him.
Thank God for sisters.
Yeah.
Refine us.
And I had to tell him and teach him, like, hey, like it's okay. And so things can get messy. You can always clean it up.
Yeah. Right.
It's okay if you didn't do as good on this particular thing. It wasn't perfect. I'm still proud of you. Even in playing sports, I saw it come out of him and him stepping up, and he worked hard. He wants to do well. But I was so proud of him and how his willingness to be vulnerable, to be in competing in an area that he didn't know much about.
Mm-hmm.
It was his first year. Many of those kids had played for a long time, for years, and they were playing together. And it was totally new. So getting to coach him throughout that process was extremely rewarding to me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Watching him take risk, watching him fail, watching him see his own growth, and celebrating that growth. Not talking about the games they lost, but pointing out to him, hey, this is the best team. You're playing the best team, and you guys almost beat the best team in the league. So celebrating that.
What about little things like, I'd say one of the things that, we're and maybe I'm a little late. And for those of you who have young kids, get your kids cleaning early.
Oh, man.
Goodness gracious. So we're getting some of our kids to start cleaning. It's Judah, Maggie, Caroline, do the dishes. Bro, they've broken many dishes and they get upset about it. And like, in a sense, that's a failure. They're not paying attention. They drop a glass or something.
Especially when they lost a finger. I mean, that was probably the worst.
No, but
cut her brother, bleeding.
Yeah, but and something so practical like that, like my kids will look at me, they're like, they know they just broke it. It's something that's quote valuable.
Right.
It's destroyed. Have you had any like situations like that? Him, breaking things or?
No, we've taught our kids we're a little different. We taught them to be very respectful of other people's property, to be conscientious of, like we started working with them early about how the cost of things, how much things cost, time, etc. So we're a little bit different on that end. They have broken blinds that were not cheap and whatnot. And I have watched them. We told them, it's okay, but we have talked to them about like the valuing things, valuing what we own. What we have is not our own. It's been given to us. So we should treat it as such. So yeah, our kids do clean. They do their own cleaning. I've talked to young men today who don't clean their own rooms, whose parents do all their laundry. Our kids do their own
insane.
Laundry.
Yeah.
They clean up there after themselves, and we hold them to a high standard of that. And they've kind of held up to it.
That's awesome.
So
you mentioned there's 4 stages of manhood, right?
Yeah.
The idea that each stage is a gift. Can you kind of talk through those? It's really interesting. I don't know if I've heard this before. What are the 4 stages? Can you kind of break those down a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So you got boyhood. So boyhood is, from, I would say toddler age, to what is the age? 7, 8, he's a boy, maybe 9. And then you have, and so he's growing, and then even longer, maybe 10. And then you have adolescence, 11, 12, those young years where he's not quite a teenager, right? I would, again, I said it earlier, I'd make sure that he was taking risk and he was getting back up and challenging himself. As a adolescent, I would tell him to enjoy the change that's happening in his life, in his body. His body's changing, his thinking's changing. Right? There's so much of that is uncomfortable. It's almost like there's like this healthy fear and awkwardness.
Pains,
right? Teaching him to embrace that and to enjoy that.
That's good.
And then as an adolescent, I would say, now that you're an adolescent, right? Enjoying, the discovery of what it means to be a man. And then you have a young man, and then you also have a mature man. So those are the 4 stages. And I would just try my best to help him process all those stages. Again, like I said, to embrace failure as a boy, as an adolescent, to enjoy the changes that are happening to his body and in his life and his mind. As a young man, to be intentional. Be intentional about the man that you're becoming.
Yeah, that's good.
Because you're going to be that man for the rest of your life.
Right.
So
That's
those are things
awesome. I
would
love
leave with.
that.
Nathan.
It's hard. I mean, it's a hard question. One thing, I think, I don't have a son
Yet.
Hopefully soon. Yes. But I think for me, one of the things that I found very valuable, I think my parents actually taught me this, is the idea of initiative. If you see a problem, go after it, fix it, don't wait for someone else. So I think it goes back to, I know we've referenced it in other episodes, but I feel like men are supposed to be people that run towards responsibility, not away from it. I would tell my son, if you see something that needs to be changed, something that needs to be fixed, something that can be better, don't wait for someone else to do it. Take the initiative, the leadership to fix it yourself. I feel like that is a mandate for us, right? If you even look back at Genesis 3, right? The mandate that God gave Adam and Eve, specifically Adam, was take dominion, subdue the earth. Right. And then the idea was what you cultivate in the garden spread throughout the earth, right? It was like, take authority over the world that I've given you and build it into something significant. And so I feel like as men, we are at our best when our hands are full. We have a weight on our back when we're doing something that matters, when we're building things, we're going after things, we're improving things. And I think when men lose that sense of purpose, when they don't have a higher responsibility they're living for, they start settling for worthless things. Yeah. I think as men, we're created to carry a heavy load and do something that's significant, something that matters. And you can't do that if you don't own something, if you don't take responsibility for it, if you don't feel some sense of like, this is mine to cultivate and to carry. And so I would say, not only for my son, but for any men out there, like, if you're trying to dodge and duck responsibility in your life, like, wake up. Like, that's why you exist. Right. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the primary reasons. And as long as you try to avoid responsibility, you will never understand who you're supposed to be.
That's good.
How would you say, like, little practical lessons? Like you have 2 girls, and that's awesome.
I mean, there's things that they own, right? There's certain chores and responsibilities they have. I mean, when your kids are younger, obviously school is probably the primary example.
Absolutely.
Like certain expectations about how they perform and things they do. But I think it's like looking at what God's naturally gifted you at doing and then taking a responsibility to cultivate that gift in your life. So like as a dad or a mom, if you notice your kid has a proclivity or a skill in some area, you're like, man, that's uncommon. They're actually better than most kids at their age. Then you should teach your kid. That's a gift God's given you to steward and cultivate into something significant. And don't just run from that because you're like, well, I just want to play all the time, or I don't feel like doing it. Like, teach your kid the discipline of building something that they can use to help the world be a better place. So I think that's one example. But I would say this is an episode for men. So I'm assuming we're talking to grown men.
Yep.
You need to look at your list of priorities. I mean, I heard someone say this, and I think it's so helpful. When you look at your life, if you are married with kids, you need to understand your life in terms of priorities. Number one, if you're a follower of Jesus, your relationship with Jesus is the most important thing you need to cultivate, take responsibility for. You need to be on your knees, seeking God. You need to be in the Word of God. You need to be using your gifts to help other people. Like, that's number one. You need to cultivate your own heart. But number two, it's your relationship with your spouse. Like your wife, you need to love her well. You need to serve her well. You need to lead her well. And then it's your kids, right? You need to set the tone, set the example, show up, be involved. Don't just expect your wife to do everything. So it's follower of Jesus, it's husband, it's father, and then it's your job. Yeah. And I think if you own those 4 things well, you will be tired, you'll be worn out, but you will live a fulfilling life.
I think one of the things that I actually loved about what I've heard you say before in the past is something along the lines, and you can correct me, but you don't want to be successful at things that don't matter. Right. Talk to me a little bit, and Jermaine, let's hear your thoughts on, man, do I really want to be the best video gamer? I want to be able to beat you in Madden. Like, no, be successful at things that really don't matter.
Right. I think that's a ploy right now. Is this being successful at things that don't matter. right? First, you got to define what success is. You have success and fulfillment, and they're not synonymous.
Yeah.
So we've made this at least it appears in our culture, this, well, if you do these things, therefore you're going to be successful, and if you're successful, you're going to be fulfilled. And oftentimes, success and fulfillment are not synonymous always. You get to the top of the ladder, you've heard it said before, only to realize you're the only one there and you're alone.
Oh yeah.
You climb a ladder your entire life, and then you're up there and you're by yourself. And so success and fulfillment are not always the same. Fulfillment is an inward a satisfaction, right? That comes from God, that I'm fulfilled in who I am and what I'm doing. That does not come from this world. So I would say success and fulfillment are not the same. And then again, to your point of not being successful at things that don't matter. Like we have this culture that they have these streaks on these social media mediums. I got to keep my streak up, and I got to do this many likes.
Snapchat or whatever. Yeah.
And they're constantly measuring things that have no bearing whatsoever on their life, on their reality. They don't do them any good but simply to say, I have this thing on my app and I'm awesome at that. And so I think Scripture talks about having hope. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I think what's happening also, we are created to accomplish things. Goals are important. We're created to accomplish. And so I think a lot of our generation, they're bored or they're depressed because the hope has been deferred. Their hearts are sick because they're not accomplishing anything of significance. We are made to accomplish things that are significant as men and as women. We're made to create. Right. Genesis 3 talks about replenishing the earth. We're made to make things better. I would tell my son, leave it better than where you found it.
Right.
We're cleaning our Airbnb, I mentioned earlier, and we're like, why are you doing that? Because we're going to leave it better than we found it. We're going to leave things better. We're going to make things and people better.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
It's a good advice in every area of your life.
Yeah.
Like whatever you call yours or you have some sense of ownership over or buy into, I think that's a mentality you have to embrace as a man.
Absolutely.
I think that's why the world sucks in a lot of ways, because men have hoped someone else would do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was the strength coach for a football team in Omaha, Nebraska for a while. And I remember walking in the facilities, and they were filthy. There was chip bags and cans and just trash everywhere in the gym. And it was a urban school, about 4,000 or 5,000 students, super diverse, about 43 different nations. And I remember when I started coaching these kids, these students, these young men, and then became young women, and it kept growing. I remember watching them, and they didn't have a pride in themselves or of their school. There was and so I started picking up trash, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Guys, you're working out in filth. This is your home." Right. And we started training them how to have a healthy pride about one another and their school, and so we started like cleaning up. They were literally waiting for, the janitor would do it, or someone else would do it.
Yep.
Someone else will clean it. And I'm like, no, this is yours.
Yeah. If you think that way as a man, you need to change your mentality.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can't own every problem in the world, but I think it's looking at like a sphere of influence that you built around your life, and those things you have a responsibility to.
Absolutely.
Right?
They reflect you.
It better start in your home.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Like you better not be great at other things and suck as a husband and a father, because then your priorities are off.
Yeah.
But
I think, did you want to comment on that last question? I'm just curious.
I don't remember it, to be honest with you.
No, what I was saying is, let's not be successful at things that don't matter.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Jermaine did a good job answering the question. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Yeah. It's like, it's a simple way. When you're on your deathbed, what do you want to be remembered for? What's going to matter in that moment?
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of things that a lot of men spend their time doing that won't matter in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think on that, I think, like I said earlier, I think a lot of times this generation, they're struggling internally. They don't even know why, because they've been given this premise of, okay, if you continue to be successful at these things that don't matter, you should be happy, you should be fulfilled, only to find out that they're not fulfilled. They're not happy.
Right.
So they figure out what's missing in my life.
Yeah.
I've devoted my life to things that don't bring fulfillment. Yeah. Right. I'm doing things that don't matter. And I think that's part of the problem in our generation, is that we are prioritizing these things that don't matter.
Yeah.
We hold these things up and say, do these things, and then only to, at the end of those things, to realize we're not fulfilled or satisfied at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Maslow, his hierarchy of needs, and if anybody ever in college or you've ever studied any kind of psychology, it's kind of a standard thing.
Yeah.
And recently, I'm not sure when, maybe 10 years ago, they actually updated it, and you should check it out. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, is hierarchy of needs, a psychologist who said, man, there's these basic pillars of what people need. And for a long time, it was the pinnacle of human existence was self-actualization, right? But recently, they have updated it to say it's self-transcendence. Okay, so what he's referring to is a sense of meaning. So that once people get to they acquire money, they acquire families, they acquire all these different things, and they get to this place and they're 50, 60 years old, and they look back on their life and they're like, what did I just do with 50, 60 years of my life? Nathan, on their deathbed, how many people have died without an actual sense of purpose and actually understanding what their purpose was? And so what I would say that originally our question here was, what would we teach our sons?
One thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I would probably say, according to Ecclesiastes 11, there's this sum of the matter. In the very last verse of Ecclesiastes, Solomon writes, he says, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. And I wonder if in a certain sense, like St. Augustine said, he said, oh God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until it rests in you. Yeah. And so in a certain sense, we have been searching for all kinds of different things, and we're restless. We don't actually know the actual meaning of life. We don't know that self-transcendence. We don't know like why are we actually here? Right. To have fun, just to have children, and then build a little bit of wealth or the lack thereof, and then die. That's a miserable existence. But to know God, I want to teach my children to know God, teach my sons to know God, to fear him, honor him, respect him, and also know that he holds a sword in his hand, and he requires us to be obedient to him, to fear God and to be obedient to his commandments and the things that he's given us in life. And we will have a good, successful life in God's terms, not the world's. We don't have to worry about the quote American dream. And so I'm glad that, the psychologists are starting to get on it, but I'll say, the word of God has been saying this for generations, and maybe psychology is catching up a little bit. There's probably still some holes there, but at the end of the day, meaning for life. I want my kids to know the meaning of life, and it is to enjoy God, glorify him,
That's
and
good.
To know.
Well, it's fascinating who wrote Ecclesiastes, right?
Yeah.
Because Solomon
That's right.
had everything.
Yeah.
Right? Everything, quote unquote, everything, right? 300 wives, 700 concubines, right? 1,000 women in his harem that he could call at any moment.
Money.
He had all the money.
Right.
Wisest man in the world, fame, notoriety, power, like at the height of what society tells us is everything you need to be happy.
Yeah, that's good.
And he writes in Ecclesiastes, it was all vain. It was all meaningless.
It's all
vanity. It's like it's gone in the wind in a second. So hopefully we're not stupid enough to repeat the mistakes of someone else. We can learn someone else's failures. But I think your point's really good, is that like, even if you're not a Christian and you stumbled upon this podcast, you were created to know God. Like that is why you exist. Because if you understand life is not just the 80 years you live on earth, it's eternal. Right. Like you will exist beyond your life and your body. And so if you don't understand and know who the creator is, who created you and why they created you, you will always feel incomplete. Yeah. And so I think obviously we're all followers of Jesus. So I think this is important to us, but you can never understand yourself until you know who God is.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think that's huge.
I would actually ask all of you to maybe be very intentional. We've used that word a few times in the last last season, to be intentional. And I would say, think about the end right now.
Yep.
for being a man,
Build with the end in
sons,
mind.
your own life, your children's lives. For those of you, if you have sons, think about it. Daughters, think about it. And then particularly for yourself, I would think about the end from the beginning and start working. And you don't have to make these crazy adjustments in your life, because if you do, you're probably not going to live by them. But make some small adjustments and work toward those final goals.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else to add there?
You did great.
We did great.
Yeah.
Now, listen, I just want to thank you all once again for listening to this episode. Have a lot of great things in store for the rest of this season. Appreciate you so much. Please like, subscribe to this podcast, and please, we ask you week in and week out, and we cannot thank you enough, but please subscribe and also share this. Yeah. Share this with people that you know, maybe guys who are struggling and just trying to get their foot in life and reality. And we believe that this will give them inspiration and a kind of some information just to kind of go off, and maybe there'll be seeds in their lives to allow them to live in greener pastures. So again, thank you for that. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great episode in store. Thank you so much for listening. Until then, we're out.
Peace.